You walk into a room full of people who love you, and somehow you still feel like you're not really there. You can be sitting at the dinner table, surrounded by your own family, and a part of you is already gone, already somewhere else, watching the conversation happen around you like it's a show you weren't invited to be in. Would change. The conversation would keep flowing right past the space where you used to be. Maybe it's not even that dramatic. Maybe it's smaller than that. Maybe it's the fact that you've gotten disturbingly good at being low maintenance. You don't ask for help moving apartments. You don't mention when you're sick. You don't bring up the bad day at work, because some old automatic part of your brain has already calculated the odds that someone will actually ask a follow-up question and decided it's not worth the disappointment if they don't. So you just don't bring it up. You handle it. You always handle it. And here's the part that doesn't make sense, the part that should feel wrong, but somehow feels normal. You've built an entire identity around not needing anyone. You're the reliable one, the chill one, the one who never causes problems, never asks for too much, never makes anyone's life harder by having a hard time of their own. People probably describe you as easygoing, independent, low-key. They have no idea that this isn't a personality trait. It's a survival skill you built so early that you forgot it was ever a choice. So here's the question underneath all of this, the one that doesn't have an obvious answer yet. If you're so capable of taking care of yourself, why does being around other people sometimes feel lonelier than being alone? That question deserves a real answer, because on the surface, what you've built looks like a gift. Being self-sufficient is genuinely valuable. You don't fall apart when things go wrong. You don't need constant reassurance to function. You can be handed a crisis and somehow calmly deal with it, while everyone else is still catching their breath. People depend on you precisely because you never seem to need anything in return. That's not nothing. That's a real strength, and it's one you earned the hard way. But here's the part nobody warns you about. That same strength comes with a hidden invoice, and it gets paid quietly, in a currency most people never notice they're spending. The ability to not need anyone is, underneath it, the ability to expect that no one is coming. And once a part of you genuinely believes that, it stops asking, it stops reaching, it stops testing whether people would actually show up, because some early version of you already ran that experiment more than once and didn't like the data. So this superpower, the one that makes you so easy to be around, so low maintenance, so impressively fine all the time, is also the exact mechanism that keeps you emotionally unreachable. You praise people for being independent. You admire people for being low drama. But independence that was forced on a child isn't strength in the way we usually mean it. It's a wall built so early and so well that you've started mistaking it for your personality. Which raises the only question that actually matters here. If this pattern is this costly, why would anyone develop it in the first place? What would make a child, somewhere underneath conscious thought, decide that needing people is the dangerous part? The answer isn't dramatic, and that's actually what makes it so easy to miss. This usually doesn't come from one terrible event. It comes from 1,000 small, almost invisible moments, repeated so consistently that a child's nervous system draws a permanent conclusion from them. Picture it. A child comes home from school, genuinely excited about something, a drawing, a grade, a story about what happened at recess. They walk into the kitchen ready to hand over this little piece of their day, and a parent is on the phone, or scrolling, or just exhausted from work, and says, "That's nice, sweetie," without actually looking up. It happens once, it means nothing. It happens for years, and it means everything. The child isn't being told, "You don't matter," in words. Nobody has to say that out loud for a child to absorb it as fact.
Think of it like a plant that keeps reaching toward a window for light, and the light keeps moving or dimming or just isn't reliably there. Eventually, that plant doesn't keep reaching in the same direction with the same hope. It adopts. It grows differently. It learns to survive on less because less is what's actually available. A child does the same thing emotionally. If reaching out for attention consistently gets met with distraction, irritability, or just a kind of low-grade absence, the child doesn't keep reaching at the same intensity forever. They learn, the way a body learns to flinch, that the safest amount of need is the smallest amount of need. This is rarely about parents who don't love their kids. Most of the time, it's about parents who are buried, working 2 jobs, drowning in their own stress, their own unresolved childhoods, their own marriages falling apart in the next room. The neglect isn't always a decision. A lot of the time, it's just bandwidth. But a child's nervous system doesn't grade on intention. It only registers the pattern. When I needed something, it usually wasn't met. And once that pattern is laid down early enough, it doesn't just shape how a child acts, it quietly becomes the lens through which they read every relationship that comes after. That's the part worth sitting with for a second, because it explains so much of what happens later. A child who learns this lesson early doesn't grow out of it on their own. They grow around it. And once you understand that the wiring happened this early, this quietly, you start to wonder where else, right now, in your actual adult life, that same old pattern might still be running in the background. It shows up first in how you ask for things, or rather, how you don't. You've probably noticed that asking someone for help feels disproportionately hard, even for small things. Not because you're incapable, but because some old part of your brain still treats every request as a referendum on whether you're worth showing up for. So instead of asking directly, you drop hints. You wait to see if someone notices on their own. And when they don't, instead of feeling angry at them, you feel confirmed. See, you think, I knew it. This is exactly why you stopped asking in the first place. And the cycle quietly reinforces itself. It shows up in how you respond when someone actually does check on you. A friend texts, "Hey, are you okay?" after noticing you've been quiet, and something in you tightens instead of relaxing. You might deflect with a joke. You might say, "I'm fine," so fast it's basically reflexive. Not because you don't want the care, but because receiving care feels oddly unfamiliar, almost unsafe, like a hand reaching toward a part of you that's been braced for impact for so long it doesn't know how to be touched gently. It shows up in relationships, in the specific way you tend to overfunction. You remember everyone's birthday. You're the one who checks in first. You plan things. You smooth things over. You absorb other people's bad moods without complaint. And it feels like generosity, and in a way it is, but it's also something else underneath. If you're the one always giving, you never have to find out what happens when you stop and wait to see if anyone gives back. Waiting is the dangerous part. Giving feels safer than waiting. It shows up in how you experience silence. Someone takes a few hours to reply to a text, and your brain doesn't calmly think they're probably busy. It runs a quieter, older script. They forgot. They don't think about you the way you think about them. You're not actually a priority, you just got lucky for a while. And you know rationally that this conclusion is almost always wrong, but knowing it's wrong and not feeling it are 2 very different things, and that gap is exactly where this pattern lives. It shows up in how hard it is to take up space. In conversations, you might find yourself shrinking your own needs down to almost nothing, talking yourself out of bringing something that's bothering you because it feels like too much, like you'd be asking people to do something they were never required to do for you in the first place. Pay attention. And the cruelest part is that the people around you right now probably want to. They're just never being given the chance because you've gotten so skilled at making sure they never have to. Here's where it gets harder to look at directly, because this isn't just a list of behaviors, it's a loop, and the loop is what keeps it alive long after the original cause is gone. It works like this. You don't ask what you need because asking feels dangerous. Because you don't ask, the people around you, who are not mind readers, don't fully know what you need. Because they don't fully know, they sometimes miss things that mattered to you. And when they miss those things, instead of thinking, I never told them, some part of you thinks, see, I was right not to expect anything.
That belief gets stronger, so next time you ask for even less. The data keeps confirming a theory that you yourself are quietly rigging from the inside. This is the part that's genuinely cruel about it. The people closest to you right now are very often willing to show up, but you've engineered your entire emotional presentation to require almost nothing from them, which means they almost never get the chance to prove it. You're not testing them, you're protecting yourself from the possibility of testing them at all, because some old wound already taught you what it feels like to fail that test, and you decided long ago not to risk failing it again. And there's a longer cost underneath that, one that's easy to miss because it doesn't look like sadness, it looks like exhaustion. Chronic, low-grade exhaustion that doesn't go away with rest, because it's not actually about being tired. It's about spending your whole life in a slight, permanent crouch, ready to take care of everything yourself, ready for the moment no one shows up, because some part of you is always braced for that moment, even on good days, even when nothing is wrong. Over years, this calcifies into something that can look a lot like loneliness inside of connection. You can be in a relationship, surrounded by friends, loved by people who would absolutely show up if you let them know you needed them, and still feel unseen, because being seen requires being known, and being known requires letting someone witness the need you've spent your whole life learning to hide. But here's the part that actually matters, the part that changes everything about how you read the rest of this. A pattern that was built can be rebuilt. The nervous system that learned needing people is dangerous learned that as a strategy, not as a fixed truth about reality. Strategies can be updated. The wall went up brick by brick in childhood for reasons that made complete sense at the time, which means it can come down the same way, deliberately, one small brick at a time by you as an adult with more choice than you had back then. The way forward doesn't start with becoming a different person. It starts with something much smaller and much harder, noticing the moment in real time when you're about to shrink a need down to nothing and choosing not to. This usually begins with naming what's actually happening, even just to yourself. Not, I'm fine, but I want someone to check on me right now and I'm scared to say that out loud. That single sentence, said honestly even in your own head, starts to loosen something that's been locked for a long time. You don't have to announce your whole history to everyone in your life. You just have to stop lying to yourself about what you're actually feeling in the moment it's happening. From there, the real work is in small, deliberately uncomfortable experiments. Telling one person one time that you had a hard day instead of waiting to see if they notice. Asking for help with something small and low stakes, not because you need to prove a point, but because you need new data. Your nervous system learned its lesson through repetition, and it will only unlearn it the same way, through new experiences repeated enough times that they start to outweigh the old ones. This also means learning to tolerate the discomfort of receiving care without immediately deflecting it. When someone asks if you're okay, practice staying in that moment for 1 extra second before you joke it away. Let it land. Even if it feels strange, even if your whole body wants to brush past it, that extra second is where the new pattern actually gets built. And it means setting a boundary that might feel almost radical. You no longer have to be the only reliable one in every relationship. You're allowed to need things back. You're allowed to ask someone to show up for you the way you've shown up for everyone else, without earning it first, without making yourself smaller to make the request feel safer. The people worth keeping in your life will not be scared off by you having needs. The ones who are giving you information you needed anyway. This isn't about becoming dependent or losing the strength you built. The independence stays. The reliability stays. What changes is that it stops being the only thing standing between you and disappearing. You get to keep the gift without paying for it with your loneliness. There's a version of you, a much smaller version, standing in a kitchen or a living room holding something out, a drawing, a question, a feeling, waiting just a beat too long for someone to look up. That moment didn't get a response back then, but it doesn't have to keep waiting forever. You get to be the one who finally looks up. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently, in the small daily choice to let yourself be seen instead of just useful, to let yourself be needed instead of just needing. The wall you built kept you safe for a long time. It did its job. But you're not in that kitchen anymore, and the people in your life now are not the people who taught you to expect silence. Somewhere in this, the loneliness inside the room full of people starts to soften, not because the room changed, but because you finally let yourself take up space in it. If any part of this felt uncomfortably familiar, sit with that for a second instead of rushing past it, the way you probably rush past most things that ask something of you. That discomfort isn't a flaw, it's information. Tell me in the comments, what's one small thing you've never asked for even though you needed it? You don't have to share the whole story, just naming it is already the first brick coming down. And if this resonated, share it with someone who might recognize themselves in it too. Sometimes the most healing thing isn't doing the work alone, it's realizing you're not the only one who's been quietly carrying this. Subscribe if you want more of this, because understanding where these patterns come from is the first real step toward not having to live inside them forever.